Hi and welcome to Debunk File. My name is Sep and today we're going to be talking about a Redditor who with the snap of a finger vanished off the platform. I'm sure you can all tell by now, but as of late we've been covering much more historical mysteries than usual, straying away from what we would usually do, which is cover internet mysteries. And this is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we just find them really interesting, and two, good internet mysteries are, well, difficult to get your hands on to say the least. We still do look for them just as often as we did before, but it's close to impossible to find anything interesting anymore. This is also the moment where I'll suggest that if you do have any cool internet mysteries you want us to cover in the future, do not hesitate to tell us. With that being said though, for the first time in a while, we did find one. On our usual searches for internet mysteries, Reddit is the place we scour the most, but when looking, 90% of what you will see is either cliché ARGs or small-scale oddities that just never strike us as being too interesting. We've said this before, but finding mysteries might actually be the hardest part of the entire channel. It really isn't easy at all. On one of these scours that we often partake in, we finally found a mystery that really struck us as being both fascinating, but incredibly creepy at the same time. Here's the post I first found. The headline states, "We'll be entering the catacombs in a few hours-ish." When reading the post in question, not only is it clear that he is talking about the Paris catacombs, but there are loads of other creepy things in the post itself. To summarize it, he mentions wanting to go into the catacombs to stop a portal, and even says that he will make a tutorial about how he is going to do this. He even mentions beings from inside the catacombs that apparently will not be able to stop him. The final takeaway from this post, and something that is often seen in other posts revolving him, is that he has had some people during the entirety of this situation giving him advice and help on how he is going to enter the catacombs, and shut down this supposed portal. When looking at some of his other posts, which we will truly delve into more later, I found out that these people were all in a Discord server with him, and not a single invite link for said server is anywhere to be found, at least in all the places I looked. The creepiest part about everything here, this was the OP's final ever post on Reddit, over a month ago. If this man truly set out for the catacombs like he claimed to in this post, what happened? Now, let me just say what I'm all sure you skeptics are screaming in your heads right now. Oh, this is clearly just a fake account trying to get attention, similar to the average ARG you find everywhere. And with me also being quite the skeptic, trust me, I thought the same exact thing when I saw this original post. But in this specific instance, that does not seem to be the case at all, and the truth could be much darker. Like we said, the final post was an entire month ago, but the creepiest part about all of this is that his post history does not at all suggest that this is the works of somebody simply trying to bring an ARG off the ground. It suggests something much, much darker. The first post was one that I really didn't think of much, but it actually becomes important later. It's entitled, "Saw someone get run over by a train and didn't feel anything." He mentions being on his way to work when someone was unfortunately struck by a train, and as the post title suggests, he didn't seem to feel anything for some reason, and this weirded both him out and his passengers. This doesn't seem too important yet, but much later down the line, it's gonna come back. On his next post, we can see a huge, unsettling red alarm. On the advice subreddit, a post entitled, "Seeing and Hearing Things That Aren't There" was created. In this post, most of the hallucinations he sees are quite small, such as seeing a small spider in his peripheral vision, but he did mention a pretty big hallucination he had from a few years ago, where he mentions seeing the silhouette of a small child on all fours charging at him, only for it to vanish when he fully looked at it. He mentions that happening one other time with a full-size silhouette. Unfortunately, these hallucinations aren't just limited to his sight. He also hears things. According to him, all throughout his childhood, he would hear a very specific noise, which has since vanished over time. Another rare noise he hears is the barking of a dog scarily close to him when he is trying to close his eyes to sleep. In the comments, he also mentions them increasing in frequency. The most important takeaway from this post comes at the end though, where he states that he is not a believer of the supernatural, which greatly contradicts the final post he made, where he literally mentioned going to the catacombs to stop a portal. A couple months after this, his next post of importance seemingly came out of absolute nowhere, where he asks what to do after seeing interdimensional beings. This post came a few months after his first hallucination post, and in the span between these two posts, everything else was completely normal. Like posts to various gaming subreddits, but over here, he seems to have taken a complete change. After this, nearly every post would just get crazier and crazier. A post from 4 months ago had the OP asking Reddit how he could banish interdimensional beings, and while the post itself is now gone, the comments gave away a lot of very important details. Someone reasonably wasn't sure if this guy was for real or not, and that's when the OP responded by saying, "I know how it sounds, I get that a lot. I don't blame you if you don't believe me. My coworker sure didn't. For context, the names mentioned are Discord aliases. If there's people on Reddit with those names, I don't know if they're the same." Naturally, people looked through his post history, and since he had a history of seeing hallucinations, which is when his worries grew, as they were thinking that these Discorders were just enabling him. The part that grabs my attention the most about this all is the response from the OP, where he says to the commenter that he may be right. The way he responds to the comments consistently casts doubt on this being a fake story to me. It just seems too realistic. So, the story ends there, right? The OP realized that he was being taken advantage of by malicious online trolls that convinced him his hallucinations were real and got himself some much needed help. I really hope it ended that way, but it didn't. His next post of intrigue opens a whole new layer to this rabbit hole. It's another post about him asking how to get rid of interdimensional beings, and while that sounds like much of the same of what we have already read, there are a few things here that, like I said, give this mystery a whole new layer. First off, he mentions these Discorders he had been frequently speaking to again, and they actually told him to give a significant part of himself, and in particular, recommended his finger. At the end, he also states that he is glad to know that these aren't hallucinations like he once thought, and were in fact interdimensional beings the whole time. This is really unsettling, and it's showing, at least to me, that these people he has been talking to are actively enabling him. Again, another thing that makes me feel that this post isn't just bait is the fact that after this, he put up completely normal posts on the Friday the 13th subreddit still, and when combining that with how the post began and how he responds to comments, it's increasingly likely to me that this is in fact genuine, unlike pretty much every other Reddit mystery we've ever covered. Not long after this, he made a post to the paranormal board that seemed to not stand out among his array of other posts, talking about the same things, until you read in. He mentions going on to meds and them not working at all, and now wonders if these sites that he still sees, even with the meds, are ghosts instead of interdimensional beings. From this point forward, things get way worse. 2 months after that, he put a post into the Ask subreddit where he once again is back to mentioning these interdimensional demons, and asks if there is a hell portal in the Paris catacombs. He was quickly told to get back on his meds, and this is when our OP said that since they didn't make much of a difference, these beings are actually there. He says that the illness was a distraction to prevent him from making the journey to shut down the portal, and now that this distraction has been foiled, they created this pandemic to shut down the airports. What he is saying is very obviously the regurgitated words of the Discorders, because I'm assuming that after the Reddit thread where he said that he was going to get help, he told these Discorders about that, and this was definitely the information they gave him to convince him to stay with them. After this, we got a post saying, "Do I have schizophrenia? No." This is another post where he is reassuring us that because the meds didn't make a difference, he doesn't have schizophrenia and everything he has been seeing is real. The most important thing to note is that the post was made on a subreddit called r/dimensional breach. This is a tiny subreddit created by our OP himself, and as you'll see, it's going to give us a lot of information for the future, mostly revolving around the aforementioned Discord. After this, he made a post on the advice subreddit once again, asking for advice on traversing unofficial routes into the Paris catacombs. While no one answered that question, our OP did give some information regarding his plan. He mentions needing an alternative route for getting into the catacombs due to lockdown, and also lets us know his equipment for the journey. He has one big metal industrial flashlight, 20 turpentine holy ritual flasks, one sleeping bag, one Bible, 2 cans of beans, one buck knife for the cans, and some chalk to mark his path and avoid getting lost. On the Paris Catacomb subreddit, he made a post saying much of the same. The only difference is that he specifically stated that his journey would begin in just a few days. This is one of the posts that wound up getting quite a bit of attention, and naturally, of course, almost everybody was telling him that there is no portal there and to not go. But one reply definitely stood out to me, and I find worth noting. When the subject of using chalk to make his way back, somebody replied to the OP saying that monsters can track him with the chalk, and he is shocked to hear this, claiming that this comment probably saved his life and will now not use chalk. On his Dimensional Breach subreddit, he once again went over the gear setup, but at the end he said something that most definitely struck worry in me. He says that he will be brought over to Paris by a group of gentlemen, which is something that obviously had me fearing the worst. From here on out, you'll start seeing a huge shift in the way the OP types. Before, while obviously saying some absolutely insane stuff, you'd notice that his sentences were very coherent and featured little in the way of grammar issues. This now completely changes. In a comment reply to somebody, he mentions getting to a big building. Whether this is a hotel or not is pretty unclear, but he says a couple went through his things and forbid him from keeping his pickaxe and shovel. Towards the end of this, he mentions continuing the journey on his own and forgetting to bring money with him, so he only has a little food, no shelter, and is going to Paris on foot. Now in this comment, he mentions currently being in Calais, which is in France, and since he mentions having to go to Paris on foot, naturally, I wanted to see how long it would take to get there, and well, it's 55 hours on foot. Yikes. After this, we see a post on his Dimensional Breach subreddit, and here he says he is currently hiding in a dumpster to stay away from the dimensional beings. This again highlights just how far he is deteriorating. And at last, we return to the final post. This one we showed at the beginning. He said he'd enter the catacombs in a few hours. He said it would take maybe a day or two and he'd return with videos. He still hasn't come back. While the story is nearly over, there's a little bit more to unpack. Somebody mentions referring to a Discord user who also has a Reddit, and this guy actually jumped into the conversation and had some interesting things to say. I thought this sub died out. I didn't participate in the troll OP. I only joined the Discord because I know Snap Fingers IRL. The only thing I did was getting him to post online because he was hung up on an incident that happened when I was driving him to work. Simply put, the man needed but refused to talk to a professional when he needed to. I'm not even in the Discord anymore. I was ejected by the 2 sick fucks who took it too far. This guy also mentions the 2 Discord users convincing Snapped Fingers that everybody else was possessed, so he'd only listen to them. He also says that he was unbalanced, so he couldn't even drive, and stated that he wanted to wash his hands of the matter. One last thing he says is that he used to drive Snap Fingers to work, and this is when that whole train incident happened. He also mentioned Snap Fingers having too much pride to post an accurate account of his own reaction, which suggests that the initial post of the OP not feeling anything when he saw someone being hit by a train was false. Now I must say that we have to take this guy's comments with a grain of salt because it's literally impossible to confirm that he has any relation to this at all. For all we know, he could be a jacker, and since his account has been deleted, I can't look into his history. There is one more moment to this story though, and it comes from another Redditor. This time, he isn't claiming to know our OP in real life. He claims to have actually been a part of the Discord and would answer questions revolving that. Some naturally asked who Snapfingers was, and while he didn't give a full name, he said it was Richard P. He did mention that he was schizophrenic and extremely gullible, which is something we clearly have already seen, and also mentions paying off a $700 locksmith, which to me at least sounds absolutely ridiculous. As proof, he did give screenshots from the Discord server, but his posts have been absolutely very suspect to me. If he is truly involved like he claims he is, it would cast doubt on this entire story. The other possibility is that he is also a jacker. However, he did give Discord proof. It is easy to fake that stuff though, but I do wonder why he would, because in the grand scheme of things, this mystery is very unknown. This user also deleted his account, just like the previous guy. Overall, that's all to this saga. It's been over a month at the time of writing this, and Snapped Fingers has still not returned. Those 2 users up to this point are the only valuable pieces to the story. So with all that out of the way, let's get to the mystery at hand. Obviously, the only thing we are trying to figure out here is if these posts are real or not. If they are in fact real, we'd like to find some definite evidence of this, and if it's fake, we'll attempt to do the same. There's nothing else to say, let's just do this. This isn't a very complicated mystery. The thing we're here to find out is, of course, whether it's real or not. If it is, what exactly happened to this guy? Is he in prison? Or worse? And if this isn't real, was it just an elaborate story? Time to figure this out. When figuring out if this is real, there were a couple of things we had to do. Before searching if there had been any arrests in the catacombs this year, we just wanted to go over everything we've seen so far. As stated earlier, his descent into madness seemed frighteningly natural, which is what made this story stand out so much more to me than any other Reddit mysteries I always come across. Obviously, this could have been the works of a particularly good writer, but to me, that just didn't seem to be the case. Well, until those 2 other accounts came in. These 2 accounts are tough to judge, because as we said earlier, there is a chance they weren't involved at all, and since both accounts have since been deleted, I can't really prove for sure that these accounts were ever involved. What I will say is that them deleting both profiles soon after being questioned on their validity is incredibly suspicious. Unfortunately, I do think these accounts are actually connected after all. Remember that ridiculous mention of a $700 locksmith? Yeah, I thought that sounded absolutely ridiculous, but something that flew right under my nose was the fact that the final post actually indirectly mentions this locksmith. He says that he sent the lockman to put it back where he found it. This right here really signals to me that despite being incredibly convincing for the surface, this may not be real after all. It doesn't end there though, of course. The next step was, of course, to check if there had been any arrests in the catacombs from this time span, or if worse come to worse, any deaths. When researching this, I found out that the catacombs actually has a special police force, and they've been patrolling the place since 1980 and apparently find up to 100 people a week that illegally enter the catacombs. This is an outrageous amount, but there are a ton of people that like going down there for various different reasons. With that being said though, things changed during the lockdown. During lockdown, the place was closed and actually just opened back up as recently as June 15th, but during the lockdown, it was unclear as to whether or not they were still around. I'd assumed that they were, but nothing confirmed or denied this. The most important thing though is that the vast majority of the time they find people in the catacombs, they don't arrest them, they find them. One of the theories surrounding this OP is that he was arrested and not that he died. While there's still a very slim possibility that he was arrested, if this were to actually be real, there's not a high probability that this is the case. So if this was real and he wasn't arrested, the most notable other theory, and one that is more popular than the aforementioned one, is the fact that he died down there. It makes sense as to why this theory is so popular. This man is severely mentally ill, and when you take someone like that and put him in an endless maze, the results are not going to be pretty. I'm here to reassure you that the chances of him dying assuming this is real is incredibly low. First off, despite what you may think, dying in the catacombs is actually extremely rare. Because of the cataflix and the fact that such a high amount of people enter here illegally, he would have likely been found by now. One thing that I can hear coming from a mile away already is the fact that the catacombs are locked down, and we already mentioned earlier the fact that we can't prove that the cataflix were still patrolling here, or not. Meaning if he somehow died down here, there would be no cops to save him. The problem with this theory, though, is that the catacombs opened back up on June 15th, meaning he would have absolutely been found by now if he was somehow dead. If this is somehow real, our OP didn't die here. That means if this story was real, there was only one more possibility for what could have happened. And that is, he somehow snuck in and snuck out without being caught. But then if that were the case, why did he never come back to Reddit? Even when his mental health was deteriorating like crazy, he was still very active on Reddit, so why wouldn't he make any more updates when he clearly mentioned his desire for shooting the entire process on film? To me, it seems that his sudden disappearance was clearly meant to insinuate his demise. But if this were to be real, you could make the case that maybe he found help and that's why he disappeared. But then again, he mentioned traveling here via a plane, so that doesn't seem likely at all. One other thing worth noting is the fact that this story seems to sound a lot like the plot of the movie, As Above, So Below. This is something that other Redditors mentioned, and it's absolutely true. In case you don't know, the plot to that movie, it follows somebody seeking out a specific artifact located deep in the catacombs, and as the main characters in the film make their way there, they go insane. I shouldn't need to explain why that sounds so familiar, but it's definitely something worth noting. So with all these theories regarding this Redditor's post being real, seemingly relatively impossible, I'm very confident that this was actually a story. However, a much more convincing one than usual. So, consider this file debunked. While the story was a great read, that is all it was, a story. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to follow all of our social medias for updates and exclusive content, all linked in the description. Especially consider becoming a patron, as even $1 a month really helps and you guys get some slick rewards, and of course, make sure to like this video, share this with your friends, and subscribe. As always, my name is Seb from Debunk File. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.